Hello and welcome to Southwest. I'm Anushara Visood and you're watching State of Play, a daily roundup of all things politics, policy, and human interest. The Justice Hema Committee report was seen as a movement to bring about safe workspace for women, to hold those who women accused of harassment at workplace accountable. Now, several of the harassment cases that were filed based on the findings of the Hema Committee report have hit a roadblock. So much so that the Kerala police have, in fact, told courts that they have no choice but to let go of these investigations, close these cases. Their argument is that the survivors in these cases are not cooperative. They are not coming forward to record statements despite multiple notices. This entire scenario has now once again raised questions on whether perpetrators will go scot free and whether this was a failure of the system, but more importantly, what now happens to the Hema Committee report. Launched in 2017 after outrage and outcry following very serious nature of sexual harassment assault in the Malayalam film industry or those involved in the Malayalam film industry, the Hema Committee report was seen as a reform, so much so that other film industries took a cue from the Hema Committee report or the formation of the Hema Committee to come up with their own versions of investigations panels to address concerns of harassment at workplace in their respective film industries. Much like the Hema Committee report, very little has actually translated into actual policy framework and implementation at the ground level. However, the committee itself was seen as a beacon of hope for several women who came forward to record their experiences of harassment on film sets in the Malayalam film industry. The concern also stems from the fact that several of these statements that were recorded in confidentiality were then made public after the police started registering cases. Now, the cops insist that several of these victims, survivors, do not want to come forward and cooperate with the case. But on the other hand, there are women, very senior actors like Mala Parvati, who insisted that their statements recorded in confidentiality were deliberately registered as cases made public, causing them much trauma, also costing them their work in the workplace, considering that it is still a very patriarchal, misogynistic, structured workplace where women who speak up are often punished, not protected. Of the 120 FIRs that were filed since the Hema Committee report was made public, just about 26 have reached the stage of charge sheet. Interestingly, out of this 26 cases that have reached the state of charge sheet, only one stems from a case that was registered on the basis of the Hema Committee report. All in all, out of these 120 cases, only 35 cases were based on the findings of the Hema Committee report, and only one of them ended in a charge sheet. Several of these cases, now the police have been filing closure reports, insisting or at least stalling the entire probe in this case, considering that the survivors, the victims, those involved, are not coming forward to record their statements despite multiple notices. Of these 120 cases that came after the Hema Committee report, about 25 of them stemmed on pretty much a suo motu basis based on testimonies and online public statements, disclosures of several women who came forward with allegations. Some 50 odd cases were registered on the basis of allegations raised by women in the film industry against well-known personalities like actor MLA M. Mukesh, Association of Malayalam Movie Artists, or Amma, that the Amma's former General Secretary, actor Siddiq, and actor Jayasuriya. All of these cases came about after the Hema Committee report was placed in the public domain. A redacted version was placed in the public domain, and more women came forward with allegations. Now, these cases are still being probed. When actors like Mala Parvati approached the Supreme Court saying that their confidential statements to the Hema Committee report, which were aimed at a different thing altogether, more than bringing their perpetrators to justice, these women came forward to voice their concerns, to also speak about or probably expose the dark secrets of the Malayalam film industry, hoping that in the future the place will become safer for women. When Mala Parvati approached the Supreme Court, the Apex Court too stood by her, gave a favorable verdict, insisting that survivors and those who stood by them should not be harassed in the name of a probe. Now, why the Supreme Court did this is because South First has done a series of stories on the Hema Committee report, the aftermath of the report, and how it has actually impacted in the absence of the government actually coming up with a policy framework and making workplace safer for women. What has it actually led to? And what we found out, my colleague Sri Lakshmi Soman has put together a series of stories on the Hema Committee report. I insist that you read it on South First. What we found out is that several producers and production houses now don't want to hire women, especially on the technician front, because instead of addressing the problem of unsafe work environment, instead of making the workspace safer for women, producers are choosing not to hire women. According to them, then they don't have to deal with the headache at all. But this is leading to continuous gender discrimination. Women are not being given jobs despite being fully qualified for it, simply because the production house does not want to take the effort to make the workspace safer. Now, with the police too insisting that several of these harassment cases that were noted in the Hema Committee report have hit a roadblock and will not be probed further, and the investigation is being stalled or cases are being closed off, considering that survivors are not coming forward to speak about it or record their statements, activists and industry insiders worry that what was supposed to be a systemic reckoning could actually fizzle out without delivering justice or the change that it promised. The unwillingness of the survivors to engage are likely due to various reasons, right from fear of being excluded, fear of being denied work, considering that this entire structure and system is extremely patriarchal still. It is controlled by very powerful men. It could be the fear, it could simply be not willing to relive the trauma. The fear of repercussion is very real, and until there are systems in place to ensure that victims, survivors of harassment at workplace will not be punished for speaking up, for standing up for themselves, this fear will not lead to any concrete action. Eventually, it will be a collective failure of making the workplace safer for women. The police may insist that the victims or survivors are not coming forward to record their statements, and hence, several of these cases of harassment noted by the Hema Committee report will have to be dropped. But the purpose of this committee was far more than just highlighting harassment at workplace for women. It was about recommending, it was about putting in place a system that checks all of these instances to avoid such harassment in the future, making the workplace safer for women. And the Hema Committee has given a set of recommendations which need to be implemented, and this is where the Pinarayi Vijayan government, the LDF government in Kerala, has to step in. It is not enough to simply form a committee, allow the committee to gather testimonies and speak about what is happening in the industry. There has to be some concrete outcome of such a committee, and this committee has made recommendations. Now it is up to the government. It's been 5.5 years, and it is now the time for the government to step in and put in place mechanisms to make the workspace safer for women, failing which the discrimination, the ostracization, and systematic removal of women, elimination of women from workplace will simply keep becoming bigger, stronger, and more clear. Women have worked very, very hard to ensure that they do not face discrimination at workplace, especially when they are qualified, if not more, as much as their male counterparts. Having to speak up for themselves against harassment and against unsafe work environment should not become the basis of discrimination, should not become the basis of denying work to well qualified women who deserve opportunities and not punishment, who deserve a safe working place and not an attempt to quell any means of standing up for themselves simply because they stood out or voiced out against harassment at workplace. Denying women the opportunity to work simply for speaking up against an unsafe work environment should not be acceptable, and it is high time that the Kerala government intervenes and ensures that the workspace in the Malayalam film industry becomes safer for women and is not a place that discriminates on the basis of gender. Until I come back to you with yet another episode of State of Play, do stay tuned to South First. Thank you so much for watching.